You know about Advent? Anybody? Heard of Advent? This year we're starting a new series following the historic church calendar, the church year, and there's going to be all sorts of holidays that you may or may not be familiar with. From Advent to Epiphany, after the holidays, Trinity Sunday, Transfiguration Sunday, even the full 12 days of Christmas are going to be celebrated this year. It's going to be a good year and a learning year for us. You know, we've celebrated Advent before as a church the last several years, but it turns out we've been doing it all wrong, like all wrong. I mean, I always thought that Advent was like a preparation, like early Christmas, like an extra 3 or 4 weeks to binge eat after Thanksgiving. I don't know about for you, but for me, Thanksgiving to Christmas is basically just a time to binge eat with impunity. Because in January, your gym's going to call, and they're going to say, we gave you a courtesy restart to your automatic deductions on your membership down here. We think you probably should get down here and use it. Does that happen to you? I mean, I actually prefer that it happens to me that way, because I feel like even if I don't make it to the gym in January, at least I paid my dues. Like, that counts for something, right? But, Advent is for me, it's been a time for white elephant gift parties and, Clark Griswold neighborhood light rivalries. And, that's the reason for the season, to prepare for Christmas. But it turns out Advent isn't about any of those things. Advent is a part of the historic church calendar that recounts and retells the story of Jesus' life throughout the year. It's a season of preparing for Christmas, but not by shopping or partying or decorating or any of those things. That's not the reason for Advent. Advent is a time for slowing. It's a time for reflecting. And it's a time for reacquainting ourselves with the story of Christmas, or rather the backstory of Christmas. Christmas has a prequel, and Christmas has a sequel as well, but Christmas has a prequel. And Advent is a time to relive that story. Now, we think we tend to know what Christmas is about, but unless the backstory, you'll miss the meaning of Christmas. So today I'm inviting you all to begin celebrating, or not really even celebrating, observing or partaking in Advent, the longest night, we're calling it. Now, we've prepared a guide, and those are available. If you didn't get one last week, there's more out in the foyer that just explains all kinds of things going on. There's a turkey drive. You can go out and buy a turkey, take one out of the deep freeze for the food pantry. In a couple weeks, you can come and serve with the food pantry here. It's going to be a great week. There's about this many people in the room when we do food pantry. It's a wonderful morning to serve with your kids. The brochure talks about this missions offering and preparing for that. There's an invitation to go down with us to the Renucci house and serve dinner for families that are in the hospital over the holidays. There's an opportunity as you exit the doors to pick up some supplies and some needed things for the Bakari family, the refugee family that we helped settle last year. There's all kinds of stuff you can do with your kids in the guide. We try to do something every day. We never hit the goal, but from just random acts of kindness to family talks around the Christmas tree about Jesus, Advent is a time you can make it a time to prepare your heart for Christmas. One of the things I'm inviting you to do in the guide is to check out the lectionary. Over this month, we're going to be, and the rest of this church calendar year, we're going to be preaching through the lectionary, which is an old guide to Bible readings day by day, week by week. And so you can check that out. We've actually got them like baked right into the Vineyard mobile app now. So if you say, I'm not much of a reader, and, December, I just mostly binge eat like you, and there's actually a little guy in there that'll read it to you now aloud. And if you don't like him, there's like a woman too. And I like the British guy. There's a guy with a British voice if you go to the NIV UK. But you don't even have to read it. Somebody will read it to you every morning. But we're trying to make it really easy on you, or maybe hard on you, not to get into the Bible during Advent. Because today, in our preschool and early grade school classes, they are taking home Advent candles like this and a rack that they painted. And we're giving them a kid's guide that has all sorts of scriptures for each week to light the candle and read a scripture and ask questions and pray together and a song to sing. And we're specifically giving them to kids that are too young to read it on their own. Sorry. So you can't get out of it. I mean, this is their special craft they painted last week. We're trying to make it really hard for anyone to find an excuse not to read the Bible with us this Advent. But let's talk about Advent. If it's not the season for just Christmas shopping and decorating, what is it? Well, as I said, it's the backstory to Christmas. And it brings us back to a time in history that was not sweet tidings of joy. It was a time that was not all calm and bright and round young virgins having holy infants tender and mild. A time in history that there were no twinkling lights. In the years before Christmas, the world was just darkness, deepest darkness, the longest night. So we're not going to just bask in the twinkling lights of Christmas this year. We're going to, during Advent, be reminded just how dark the world is, that it's truly a dark place. We're going back to about 800 years before the first Christmas, to the book of Isaiah, the source text for all of Advent. And Isaiah is really like the first Christmas carolist. His words and the meditations of his heart are where the hope of Christmas was born in Israel. We're going back to a time when Israel was just laid waste by war and corruption and an invasion and exile. It's a time where Isaiah writes in chapter 1, your country is desolate. Your cities are just burned with fire. Your fields are being stripped. Your foreigners right before you, just laid waste to everything. It's when overthrown by strangers. It's a time in history, in Israel's history, when God was just sick and tired of the whining and the prayers and the formulas of his people. And so he just says, when you spread out your hands in prayer, I hide my eyes from you. Even when you offer many prayers, I'm not listening. Your hands are full of blood. You know, he says, woe to those who are heroes at drinking wine, champions at mixing drinks, who acquit the guilty for a bribe but deny justice to the innocent. Therefore, the Lord's anger burns against his people. His hand is raised and he strikes them down. The mountains shake and the dead bodies are like refuse in the street. That's the backstory to Christmas. The longest night, bleak and utter darkness. And what we forget when we look at the sentimental manger scenes is that there's only one reason a baby is laid in a manger: abject poverty. There's only one reason that Mary even had Joseph to help her that night with the manger, because Joseph had a dream and decided afterward not to subject his young fiancée to death by stoning like you do. I mean, there's only one reason that you leave your hometown 9 months pregnant to go to, oh, little town of Bethlehem. It's because, only because of political regime that's crushing the people and grinding the poor into the ground. There's only one reason that angels go to shepherds by night, because the temple of God has become a den of thieves, and the chief priests of the temple were just so corrupted that by greed and ego that they would have never sung glory to God over a poor baby born in Galilee. Have you forgotten the real story of Christmas? I mean, before it was cleaned up for kids' Christmas pageants, and it was a story of Middle Eastern refugees. It was a story of just desperation, a story of what happens when the government really goes off the rails, a story of when God is nowhere to be found, a story of murdered children in Bethlehem. Only it's not murder when the government does it, it's just national security. That's the first century. Bethlehem around the year 0 BC, or a couple before, it was no silent night. I mean, unless you know the backstory, you just couldn't imagine why a bright Christmas star would draw, Zoroastrian astrologists across the desert on camel to worship a dirt-poor baby in Palestine. The reason the Christmas star shines so brightly in the night is because Israel in the first century was a black hole of sorrow, crushing poverty and corruption at every level. And yet, Isaiah, 700 plus years before Jesus, before Christmas, writes this: "Nevertheless, there's a day coming when there will be no more gloom for those who are in distress. In the past, he humbled the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali, but in the future, he will honor Galilee of the nations by way of the sea beyond the Jordan. The people walking in darkness have seen a great light, and those living in the land of deep darkness, a light has dawned. For unto us a son is born. Unto us a son is given, and the government will be on his shoulders." Imagine that. "And he'll be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Of the greatness of his government there will be no end." If we take time to observe the tradition of Advent, Christmas can become for us what it was for Isaiah, the dawn after the darkest, longest night. Because the world Jesus was born into was the darkest and longest and coldest of nights. So Advent for us is a time, an invitation to slow down and ask ourselves, how much has really changed from Isaiah's day? I mean, how much has changed from the first century? Poverty? Babies with no crib for their bed? Governments that grind up the poor? Churches corrupted by greed? Refugees fleeing violence? Massacre of innocents? There's not too much in the world that's changed, is there? And Advent invites us to remember what a long night of sorrow we still live in. In some years, we just don't even have to think back that far, do we? Some years we just, Christmas brings it right to our doorstep. Some years it's sorrow is closer than we'd like to imagine. Like this year, we're losing a dear friend and brother, John, the leader of our food pantry, just a shepherd to many in this church. We're grieving with the Gonzalez family this fall, as they begged God for mercy and ultimately laid their daughter to rest. As we think about just another heart condition, a heart attack, and we're not sure what with Dave Gage, we think, why? How long, God? We grieve with Isaiah. We're waiting upon a bright light, but it's a very dark world. We don't even have to, think of our own lives, but just turn on the news and see the endless, just mindless violence, the threats of war and terror. And Isaiah would say, you're living in a land of deep darkness. You're living in a land of the longest night. So let me ask you this morning, what do you do with tragedy? What do you do with sorrow? What's your plan for living in the dark, dark night? Dark, dark world. What do you do with sorrow and grief? What do you do when loneliness strikes? And all of us feel it. Sometimes holidays make it worse, don't they? What do you do with the addictions and holiday blues and blahs and depression? What do you do? What's your plan for darkness? At Advent we sing, O come, Emmanuel, drive the dark clouds of night away. But what's your plan for dealing with the darkness of this longest night? Really, what's your plan for dealing with the darkness in the world? Well, let me suggest to you that there's a lot of options. There's a lot of options, and some of them even seem like Christian options. Have you picked an option for dealing with darkness? And one of the most common options is just to plug your ears. Close your eyes real tight. If I just keep my eyes and ears closed, I can pretend every day is Christmas. Fa ra 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 ra. You can shut off the news. You can sing another round of angels we have heard on high. You can bump it up a key. Angels we have heard on high. You can keep going. Angels we have heard on high. Until it's just noise. Because it turns out none of those are very effective. Closing your eyes, shutting your ears. At some point, the hardship of life strikes. It's too difficult, too painful. And so quite often we just move on to plan B. And plan B for many folks, it's not to put their fingers in their ears, it's to point the finger, to blame. I wouldn't feel like such crap at the holidays if it weren't for this awful family of mine. I got to see the in-laws. Or these kids, I just feel like I'm living with professional criminals. It's confession. Or I wouldn't have all these problems if it weren't for this godless country. And they're trying to take Christ out of Christmas. Have you heard? It's a conspiracy. And we point the finger and we blame. We try to pin our darkness on someone else. It's your fault. And if that doesn't work, there's always plan C. Not to point, but to cover your face in shame. It's all my fault. Don't even look at me. I'm such a lousy Christian. To cover our face, if only I could stop sinning. But my sin, it's like a plate of Christmas cookies. I tell myself, just one more. But that's the last one, and then never again. But then there's always just one more time. Because I'm a terrible person. I probably don't even deserve anything for Christmas. But if plan C doesn't work, and plugging our ears and pointing the finger and covering our face, if those fail us, we can always go for plan D, which is to reach for the medications, right? Another glass of eggnog, another plate of Christmas cookies, another shopping trip, another bender. When life gets hard, where do your hands go? Where do your hands go? What do you reach for when life gets hard? Or maybe you're one of those people that has your act a little more together. Maybe you're not plugging your ears or pointing the finger. Maybe you're not hanging your head in shame. Maybe you're not reaching for a fix. Maybe you're one of those folks that's pulling yourself up by your bootstraps. I'm going to get my crap together. I'm going to work my Advent Bible reading plan so hard, it's going to be like I'm a spiritual giant among small people. I'm going to be a serious Christian. And then I'm going to win me one of those awards for outstanding Christian humility. Not like all you lousy people. Look at you. You probably don't even read your Bible. What's your plan for dealing with darkness? You can look at your hands. And what are you reaching for? What are you depending on? The scary thing is that many of those plans seem sort of vaguely Christian, like vaguely biblical. La 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 la. Or I'm working hard for Jesus. Yes. They seem vaguely Christian, but Advent is an invitation to an entirely different response to darkness, to do something different than our instinct. Advent invites us back to the gospel, and not the gospel of the God who helps those who help themselves, not the gospel, of blame and shame, but the gospel of Jesus. You see, the gospel response to darkness is never, don't worry, be happy. The gospel response isn't, hear no evil, see no evil. The gospel response isn't the blame game. The gospel says, first of all, look around. Look around and lament. I mean, let's get honest. Wake up. Just read the book of Isaiah. We are living in a land of deep darkness. No pretending. No denying it. It's bleak. And maybe you say, well, it's not that bad for me. I mean, I'm doing pretty well. And if that's what Advent is for you, then let me recommend that you actually get closer to somebody this Advent who is in darkness. If you'd say, I'm plenty happy with the light there is. Let me recommend that you step into the world of somebody, maybe in your own neighborhood or your own family, who is living in darkness this season. As I was preparing this series earlier this fall, I talked with a young woman who lost her father the year before last, and she was talking about the first Christmas without her dad. And she said, part of the grieving process, we decided to bring a candle to the Christmas dinner table for Dad, just to remember him, to anticipate being with him again. But my cousins were going to be there for Christmas, and they had lost their mother not long before. And so we called and said, do you want to bring a candle as well? And when Christmas rolled around, she said, my cousins arrived, and they'd forgotten all about the candle. And so we fetched a spare candle and put it on the table and lit one for, my dad and their mom. But as dinner wore on, the cousins they got uncomfortable. And they said, can you just take that out of here? Just like blow it out, or, just get that candle out of here. We don't want that. And this young woman said, my cousins, they don't have faith in Jesus. I mean, I realize that for them, death is just like darkness, just blackness. There is no hope. And there's no reason to keep a candle burning when there's no hope. It's just too painful. And you may not realize it, but for all intents and purposes, for many people in your life, the light of Christmas has not yet come into their world. The light has not yet dawned. There is no plan for darkness beyond just faking it, medicating it, shoving it out of the way, out of sight. And Advent is a time to open our eyes and look around, to grieve for a world that has rejected our great hope. And the gospel of Advent invites us to look around, to lament, but then secondly, to call out to God for rescue. Not to reach for a fix, not to say, I've got this, but to just admit. The world is hopeless except for, outside intervention. And so we sing at Christmas or Advent, not, oh, come, let us pull ourselves up by our bootstraps. We sing, oh, come, Emmanuel, which means God, come be with us. Oh, come, Emmanuel, and ransom us, captive Israel. We still mourn in lonely exile here. Free us, Lord, from Satan's tyranny. Disperse the dark clouds of night. Put death's dark shadows to flight, oh God. Oh, desire of nations, come bid envy, strife, and quarrels that they may cease, and fill this whole world with heaven's peace. Because if we look around, if we look honestly, we're reminded that we're utterly powerless to fix the world. You even look at the realities of last year. You think of the utter failure of us as a culture to produce even a candidate we're halfway excited about. You think we're going to look back and this will be comical if it weren't so sad. The utter failure of our country to address the evils of racism and a history of oppression of people of color. We're powerless. Our utter failure to deal with the issues at the heart of violence and mass murder. As a nation, we're becoming wealthier and more technologically advanced, but the social fabric of our country is just, it's frayed, isn't it? I mean, Advent is a time to stop pointing fingers and just say, oh, come, Emmanuel. Lord, have mercy. Rescue us. Captive America. I mean, it's a time not to point fingers at, Hollywood or Washington or, wherever, but to the gospel, the third just invites us to confess our complicity. Not to point the finger, but, to point the finger back upon ourselves and to examine ourselves and just to acknowledge, we're actually part of the problem. The problem isn't out there. The problem in the world is it's right in here. It's right in here. Advent's a time to acknowledge that, that racism and violence, it just lives right inside of us. Every one of us. Advent's a time to confess as men. It's not just the people making the headlines that have objectified women. It's all of us. To confess that the violence and the greed, it's not done with it. We're not done with it yet. And do you see what good news that is? See what good news it is? I had a neighbor visit a while back, and he actually said, it was one of these mornings where we're talking honestly about how hard it can be. And he said, the message of Jesus, it's kind of a downer. Like it seems like a church really kind of appeals to people who are just down on their luck. And I said, it's just that at the church we're getting honest that we're all more down on our luck than we realize. I mean, the real downer in life would be believing that it's all up to you. Believing that life is a matter of pulling yourself up, stirring yourself up. That life's a matter of escaping the darkness. But for the Christian, it's just all grace. It's all grace. In the lectionary passage this week from Isaiah, chapter 64, you can read it this week or your kids will make you. It says, oh, rend the heavens and come down. We need your help, God. We've all become one who is unclean, and our righteous deeds are like filthy cloth. We all fade like a leaf, and our iniquities, like the wind, they just take us away. There is no one who calls on your name or attempts to take hold of you, for you have hidden your face from us, and you have delivered us into the hand of our iniquity. Oh, God. I mean, Advent invites us back to the gospel, to confess that we need a Christmas miracle. We need it. Because until you recognize the darkness of the longest nights, you're in danger of missing the bright lights of Christmas. You don't want to miss Christmas. You don't want to miss Christmas. Because Christmas is real hope. Real hope. I mean, it's a hope you can hold on to. The gospel of Advent gives us real Christmas hope. You remember that feeling you had as a kid around Christmas? Like the anticipation? Like I could get, my whole world could change. I could get all those. You remember the feeling on Christmas, the anticipation that just a few short weeks from now, you're going to receive a gift that you could never possibly hope to acquire on your own because you're 10 years old and you have nothing. Do you remember that feeling? Or maybe you wished you had that feeling and you didn't. I mean, the feeling that Christmas could be a time where my deep dreams would come true. It could be a time, you remember just shaking the boxes before Christmas? Like breaking things? You remember that? Like just imagining that never-ending ecstasy could await you if only you got that one thing your heart most desired. Now, I remember as a kid, my dad never seemed to have that kind of excitement about his Christmas gifts. In fact, it became kind of this running joke that no one could ever get Dad a gift that would really excite him. because he would always lament, say, it's you guys, Christmas is for the kids, and I just got this book your mom really wanted me to read. And I never really realized until I grew up, and now that I'm a dad, it took me a while to realize that you reach a point where you're just not that excited about getting anything for Christmas, because you just start to think, well, anything I need or want, I'll just go out and buy. I mean, you start to think, there's nothing anyone would ever buy me, or that could be as exciting as what I would get just spending my money on myself. All the burdens of being a dad at Christmas, right? I mean, here's the sad thing. The real gift of Christmas is a lot like the 10-year-old version of you remembers. The truth is that the Christmas gift is better than anything you could afford. It's better than anything you could earn. You could never save up enough money to buy it. Advent invites us back to that feeling we had in the weeks before Christmas. Anything's possible. I mean, there could be anything under that tree. What if this is the year? Advent invites us back to that kind of hope. It awakens us to a hope that there's a Christmas coming like none of us have ever seen. There's another Advent coming. There's a Christmas coming that will never end. There's a gift that you will never finish opening. There's a treasure that will not spoil or rot or fade. That's the excitement of Isaiah when he says, a light is breaking. A son is given. And the government will be on his shoulders. And he'll be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Of the increase of his government and peace, there will be no end. Advent invites us back to that kind of anticipation and hope. And so today we're going to share in the Lord's Supper, first week of the month. And the reason Jesus left us this sacrament is as a reminder that he's coming back. And we come to the table as those who have nothing, and yet we receive everything. We come as those without reason to hope, and we leave as those with hope that a hope that came into the world on Christmas. We come as those addicted and conflicted and hungry, and we find the only meal here that can satisfy us. We come as those recounting an old story from Isaiah's day, but we leave with a knowledge that the future is just rushing at us. Because at the table, we remember that Jesus said, I'm giving you this bread and this cup, and I will not drink it again. I will not drink this cup and eat this meal again with you until the kingdom of God comes. At the table, we're reminded that he's coming back, that there's a seat open at the table for him, that this is just a sneak preview to the meal he's preparing for us, and he's waiting for us. That is the hope of Advent. So let's all stand. We're going to worship with the band this morning. And we're going to receive the supper that Jesus offers.